On the show today, we have Trevor Stevenson and Dale Allen, and here's why they are awesome. They are the co-founders of Conscious Lead Life, a niche coaching firm that specializes in personal growth, well-being, leadership, and team development. And it's all centered around heightened awareness, conscious choices, healthy communication, and intentional behaviors. They are also executive coaches, speakers, and fellow Canadians. And they're here. Hello to you both.
Hello, hello. How are you?
I'm
And the
great.
married couple. I know we're going to touch on that, but it's just raising the bar there a little bit of
No,
opportunity
more power
for.
to you.
Well, yeah,
No, fair enough. I knew that ahead of time, but again, I mean, it is called relationships at work, so that could be a thing. But yeah, no, fair point. Before we get into any of that or air your dirty laundry, Trevor, I don't know why you brought that up, but anyway, before
we
we
haven't
get
even
into
started
any of
talking
that,
about the kids yet.
let's get into the first question I ask all of my guests, sir, which is to you both: what is your best or worst employee experience?
I was just telling my son this the other night, so it's top of mind. And I was his age, about 15 years old, actually, and pretty new. I've had a couple of other jobs when I grew up working on the farm, but I was working with a tradesman, plumber, electrician, and he was such a nice and kind and gentle man, and I learned so much from him until things didn't go well. And whether actually wasn't often me, but if something went wrong on the job site, and there was just I don't know if there was a combination of things going on in his life at the time, but he would snap and be throwing tools and screaming, cursing. It was pretty tyrannical. And so I got to learn about almost a split personality thing, because he would be so nice and so kind. But I also I had a relationship with him, Russell. I was able to kind of like mediate or moderate that his energy shortly after, and he would come back and stuff. But it was like that was sort of the epitome. I'd never sort of experienced that kind of person, so it was a Tourette's kind of thing. And so it's really stuck with me.
How old were you when that happened?
I was about 15.
15.
Yeah,
And you're not around 15 now, so it tells you how much that has carried with you for so long. I have questions, but Dale, yourself.
Yes. So mine is a best one. In university, I worked in a restaurant, a well-known restaurant that's a chain in Canada. And their two owners were phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal, totally different personalities. There is one who is definitely all about the books and numbers and, quite serious. And the other one was fun and, just like really checked in with all of us. But together they were phenomenal. And what I loved is so it's a restaurant, and we had team building sessions. That now it's so interesting being a part, being in the work that we are, that just to watch how much they took care of their employees. So they treated their employees like they did their customers. It was phenomenal. So we would get really great discounts for going there. So we went there often, and we'd bring our families, and they would always, maybe if you went with your family, they'd buy you a drink or a dessert. It always encouraged us to be there, even when we were off. So I just found it amazing when they did team building events. They did one where they thought about like the connections between every person, like that the customer sees as they come into, meet in some fashion, even if they don't meet them directly. So even if you're in the back of the house, but they made this connection. We all got to witness how much everything that we do is connected. It was so phenomenal. So their personalities were, even though they were so different, they complemented each other, and their different styles allowed all of us to grow, because you could see ourselves in either of those persons, right? Phenomenal. It's just fantastic.
Interesting, both of your stories, in the sense that, Dale, you were able to thrive and be better and be educated and understand your work and see the connections. Well, Trevor is almost being, considered an other, because you're having to manage up and manage somebody's feelings to survive through the day. Meanwhile, Dale, you were able to connect with others and not have to worry about other people other than in how you interact with each other. So super curious, how do you carry that with you? Again, you both gave me some stories from when you were quite a bit younger.
Yeah, exactly. So the late teens, early 20s for you.
Yeah.
I think for me, what it has helped with, Russell, is just recognizing how things can just switch in a moment from everything's going great, and then just something takes it off course. So I would start to see that, especially when I had other bosses who were, and I'm gonna say this, male, who where that switch would flip to anger.
Mm.
And I recognize there's a need for me to survive in that, of step away from it, give it space, take care of myself in a moment of, okay, I've seen this before. They're reacting. It's their thing. I may have, what I did may have triggered it in some way, but I need to let them cool down while I go over here, and I need to get over whatever got going on up here, and then come back. And then the important thing is that coming back to it, that healing work of just refriending or building the relationship where we can then talk about it again of, okay, so what was that? What went on for you? What, how do you freak out right then?
Mhm.
That's been good. And I, recognize, and Dale helps me see that in myself as well, which is good in parenting and such.
Fair enough. Dale.
So I think about those two often. I'm still in touch as well, and they really do. I speak about them, and I would say I channel the energy that I received from them. So here's the thing: when it was super, super, super busy, and people were in high stress, so they would always do things like, at some point, everything's moving really, really fast, and they would gather us, and we would all do a shot together. And I'm not talking because it's a shot. So it's not even about the drinking part. You could drink or not. But that even in the busiest, most stressful, most tense times, they brought us together. And so I felt like they were always looking out for us, and knew that by looking out for us, we would be looking out for the customers. And it translated so, so, so deeply. So it was like, I share that as it was a shot, but it wasn't that. It was the essence of total wellness. Like, we see you and take care of you, even though it's super, super, super busy. We can pause for a moment. And what it would do every time is, it would be like, it would take that kind of tension, and then we would just kind of drop, into this kind of sense of, we're okay, we've got this. They've just been with me for, from time since I've had that experience. It's so powerful. And I think that's how we lead with our team. And that's what we offer to folks as well. Like, you can bring a pause in an amazing way. You can check in with your team in amazing ways, and just in the most simple ways, and it will make such a difference in how they show up.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, we do that as well. I mean, we stop at about 11:30, each have a shot, really bond with each other and move on. I'm like, okay, fair. Everybody's a little different. No judgment. Way to team bond.
Right.
Well, it's a
Oh,
breakfast restaurant. You forgot to say that. Right?
That's
Sure.
been like,
After
Really
the
takes
omelets,
the edge off.
Jägermeisters. Got it. Totally understand. Let's get into what we're talking about today, which is conscious leadership. I'm curious, so curious about this. But first, we have to set the table. And I throw it to both of you to ask the question, how do you define it? How do you define conscious leadership?
I like to say conscious, this is a mouthful, but conscious nonviolent leadership. So that's what I'd love to define. I think, so conscious to me means you can be aware, of how you lead. Conscious leadership, you can be aware of how you lead. Conscious nonviolent leadership, which is what Trevor and I really practice, is leadership is about how you use your power and how you help people find their power. So being in helping them feel empowered to respond, to take action, to lead themselves and, their work, their teams, their colleagues in ways that are healthy and helpful for the goals for themselves. Conscious nonviolent leadership to me is that you can be aware of how you lead. Which means you can be aware of how you use your power. But our question is, are you helping people use their power? Are you helping yourself use power in ways that don't overpower, right? That don't have people shrink, right? So that actually has people rise. So it really is about, how are you using your power for harm or for good?
And I'm assuming you're not throwing the word violent around like we're talking people throwing punches at work or being physical. I mean, that does, and that can happen.
Right.
But right. But that is not normal. And
Right.
I'm assuming it doesn't happen. I'm assuming it doesn't happen so often. So I'm curious how your nonviolent associates itself with conscious leadership.
Maybe we're borrowing from Marshall Rosenberg, the founder and creator of nonviolent communication. And so it's a real foundation of the work that we do, Russell. And so my take on that same question is, so semantics, but non-harming, we can substitute that with, right? And the consciousness part is, as Dill mentioned, it's really, that's our awareness, right? And then the non-harming, why it's so important to us to go beyond consciousness. I know I'm angry. That's why I kicked the dog, right? Or that's why I threw that hammer. But the non-harming part is really like giving a shit enough about our impact on ourselves, or the thinking that we're having, that impact that it creates within us, and then that cascading effect, like Dale said, about the power that we have. And to me, that power is really the impact that I'm having on others, known or unknown. And do I care enough to shift my awareness and then my actions based on that awareness?
And I just asked for the clarification because I don't want anybody listening that goes, well, if nobody's physically harming anybody at work, I don't have to listen any further. Right. It's just sort of, it's understanding that this is not the automatic this equals this.
Yes.
So I find understanding things of flipping the opposite of something helps clarify as well. So maybe this seems a bit odd, but what is unconscious leadership then? Is it not knowing your impacts? Is it lack of mindfulness?
Mm. I do think unconscious leadership to me is when you don't, sorry, I was going to say about more the action of it, but you're unaware of even the possibility of how you're showing up. So it's kind of like we find that people can be so focused on the task, I've got to get this thing done, by any means necessary, that we're not aware of the emotional, the physiological impact that whatever we're trying to accomplish has on folks. And so, when you're talking about just asking about that clarification, I think if we became more conscious of things, like we know that we're going to give so for example, we know that we're giving bad news, like in a reorg, we already know that. But if I'm conscious, I would go, just telling them isn't going to be okay. It's going to bring up a lot of things for folks. So how might I tell them? How might I stay with them until, it actually, it doesn't feel good, but it's okay. So it's that one part. I think there's in conscious, there's this way of, I care to know the impact of this thing on you. Because in some ways when I care, I'd actually check in about that, and so unconscious to me means that I don't actually have to think about it. I don't care to think about it, but I don't think about it. It's automatic. And I don't kind of go into this reflective state. I don't, and sometimes it's choiceful. And sometimes it's just that you just couldn't know. Right.
That,
Do you
to
get
me,
go ahead, sorry, go ahead, Trevor.
well, that unconscious side, I think easily explained for me is we're just living out our conditioning on autopilot. So our reactivity in situations, which is rooted right back to my farm upbringing, and so how I get reactive when people are like all moving at the same time, let's say, aren't all working, and then I'll go into a hyper management mode. Or I worked on it a lot. And the same for people, I work a lot with men now. And so default patterns that exist are when they are sad, frustrated, angry, disappointed, they will go one of a few directions. They'll go into solitude and they'll play the quiet game and, passive aggressive kind of thing, or they'll go aggressive and they will overpower, as we were just saying. And there's symptoms of that conditioning that show up for them that they're even unconscious to. And then as they, and then we were just mentioning a little while ago about that consciousness, like sometimes we start to become aware. There's enough podcasts around, there's enough reels going on. We realize the way that we're supposed to be showing up or a more evolved way. And so we can be conscious of it now, and it almost makes it worse. Russell, I see this so often because now I recognize how I'm showing up and the impact, but I don't know how to change it because I've got 40, 50 years of conditioning doing it a certain way. And that just freaks me out. So I go more down into that solitude and head down, I'll just power through kind of thing. That's a really harmful place.
What's an ideal state? So say you're working with someone and you're like, you are now a conscious leader. I have bestowed upon you the title of what is the ideal state that that person exemplifies, shows up as, contributes to an environment? What does that even look like?
I love that question so much. So it's not static at all. Like it's not static. I mean, it's kind of like us trying to concentrate on something for an entire day. It's just not possible. The brain doesn't work that way. So let's say the brain doesn't work that day. No, that's not true. So it doesn't work that way. So what we're really offering, I guess, is just this way of saying, if we get into a reflective way of being, so if I check in, if I'm more aware of, I'm not just perceiving through the intellect, right? So not just, what did I say? Did I tell them the right thing? So not just using the head, but actually looking at what other ways do we take in our environment? So what other ways can I pulse check on how my team's doing, how I'm doing? So we can feel energy. You walk into a room, a boardroom, and everyone stops talking. Everyone knows what that feels like, right? So it's like when people say, this energy is woo woo, but you've had that experience where you just kind of know that something's off. We help people perceive and use other ways to perceive, not just the intellect. And when you do that, when you start to pick up and use other senses and other ways of sensing, you just kind of go, all right, this is a gut check. Oh, energy check. Wow. I don't know, I can feel my muscles like they're just kind of tensing right now or something like that. When you start to do that, you become aware in a moment of how things are going. So you can do it more regularly. And rather than this being a constant state, it's not that at all. We're just inviting people to go, oh, right. Are you willing to check in? Would you make that your practice for mental fitness? Right.
That's what's coming up for me is similar and a simplified version of that for me, because life keeps lifing, right? The perfect leader and conscious, it doesn't mean that all things in life become fabulous and it's in a state of flow constantly. Stuff keeps happening and I keep feeling these triggers that are so deeply rooted. But as Dale was saying, we ask ourselves the question of how am I being with what is? Because it's that impact on myself. So how am I, foremost for me is that I'm taking care of myself as a conscious leader. I'm taking care of myself over and over and over and over again. And that might mean, as Dale just said, recognizing wherever that is in our body. And that's what we coach to, sort of that somatic awareness as well. And then what am I going to do right now to shift that? We talk about, we're into our fitness a little bit. So we'll drop down and do burpees or, we'll go out and hug a tree or whatever it is, be in nature, these things, take 3 deep breaths, that we need to do to be well so that we can lead well.
Why? So I'm going to put the business hat on. Why? Why do I need to be a more conscious, non-violent leader? Like I'm here to deliver things. I've got to make a widget. I've got to create a service. Why does this help me be a better leader?
Well, we gave 2 examples from our boss experiences, right? And which one do you want to work for? Which one are you going to leave? Which one are you going to invite your buddies to come and work at? Which one are you going to recommend to potential clients?
I understand that. Sorry to interrupt. I understand that, but I don't know if Dale's boss would know they were a conscious leader. Like, I think they may have just been, I'm just a nice person. I understand that the people in my organization are valuable. And if I treat them well, it's like the whole Richard Branson, if you treat your employees like your customers, you'll have better, right? But they don't necessarily connect the dots to being conscious leaders. They're just, like, I've worked with or known some amazing leaders, but I wouldn't call them conscious leaders. I would just say that they were people leaders or servant leaders. So I'm just trying to get a better sense of why this is, or how your approach might vary and be of benefit for people to better understand.
Right. And that's where I think the nonviolent part is important. Like when I think about the people that we were, the 2 that I was talking about, the bosses that I had, is their awareness, like their choiceful, intentional way of focusing on their employees, that the checking in with us. So there's one, you can be kind, but their awareness to go like this and say, like, how are you doing? And noticing the difference, or joking with me at times when I needed it. I didn't eat meat, and one would always have me, send out like the biggest prime rib, a 24 ounce, like just, just to get me, like he's joking with me and all of that. It's just, to me, the difference. That's why I think you can be aware of your leadership. But I think if you can be aware whether your leadership is hurting people, I think is the biggest thing. So this is what I think, Russell and Trevor. I think leadership is easy when the sun's shining, when everything's great. It's really about when it's challenging. Like, how do you show up when it's challenging? How do you show up for yourself, and how do you show up for others? In those moments, intense moments, how we use our power really matters. We naturally will go to overpower and go to control. It's just a natural way we're in survival mode, right? When our flight or freeze response is activated, it can be very difficult to come down from that and lead from a place where people are like, oh yeah, we've got to go. We've got to get these plates out. It is not an emergency, right? It's not, no one's going to die. We were in a restaurant. But to be able to get out of emergency mode as though, someone's going to die if they don't get their food, that's how people act. We work with the corporations, we work with nonprofits. They're not always connected to someone's actual life, like in terms of someone could die if they don't get the service. But the way that people act, when something goes wrong, is almost like that. The fight, flight, or freeze response activated. When Trevor was speaking about, throwing a hammer, the hammers that we hear are the words that people will say, the directives that people give. Sometimes there is swearing, really hurtful words, and it really impacts people's ability to show up, to perform, right? So to me, being aware of how I'm thinking and how I'm speaking and how I'm acting and the impact that it has on people's health, the way that they show up is what we're really about. You can be aware and still use your power and hurt people in times of tension. And we're like, can we flip the switch on that? Can we give you a practice so that when you are, like about to, I don't know, lose it, that you've got a way to come back so that you're clear and clean, even when it's really challenging.
Speaking to Trevor's story, I mean, that was an example of someone who was a great guy until he wasn't, because things, and I think COVID was one of the biggest litmus tests for a lot of leaders, because suddenly it was hard. Suddenly they didn't just have to show up and say, go do a thing. They weren't leaders to begin with, but it really showed that they weren't leaders when they were put in situations they had no control over. So I'm going to throw this to you, Trevor, is I understand that as self-awareness is huge. Like one of my baselines for this show about being a good leader is self-awareness, situational awareness, communication. If you have those three nailed, you can be a decent leader. You can be a good leader. But if you don't have any of those three, you're not helping anybody. So I want to stick with the self-awareness